of other minority groups, and of course, than the profile of our own Dominicans back home. People really invest in education, people really value coming to university. So people really enjoy a challenge. And to succeed in the United States, and in particular in this very challenging area, very competitive area, you really need to be a hard worker, because if not, you basically don't make it. And now, why, we're doing well economically. The figures apparently reveal sustained growth. In spite of the crisis, there is a world economic and financial crisis that originated in developed countries such as the US. We have suffered tremendously this crisis. Our export performance has decreased 35%. Well, the goods exports, the services exports are more or less maintained, have kept up, no? But in spite of that, the economy has continued to grow, okay? And in spite of that, there is migration. In spite of that, people risk their lives to take a boat and cross to Puerto Rico, or to come through the border via Guatemala, Mexico, and the border states in the United States. And the reason why is that we unfortunately belong to the region of the world in which income distribution is the most unfair, the most uneven. Some figures I have seen for Brazil, for example, the highest earner earns 160 times than the lowest earner. And these are figures that more or less are representative of the dire differences in the Latin American Caribbean region as a whole. You don't find this unevenness anywhere else in the world. And I think this explains why, in spite of the high growth, there are people that are left out from this growth and therefore have to migrate because the opportunities are not there. Now, the fact that they leave doesn't mean that there are no jobs. And those jobs are taken by those who don't have jobs at home. And I always keep coming back to Haiti. And in Haiti, there is a terrible situation, a political crisis that more or less has been assisted by the international community efforts to stabilize it through the MINUSTA, the United Nations Mission for Stabilization and Assistance to Haiti. But unfortunately, we are very far from having a sustainable political process in Haiti that allows us to decide that MINUSTA just should pack their bags and come back home. I think there is a presence of the United Nations that will have to continue. But along the process, the job generation in Haiti for Haitians is still growing at a very slow pace. And the population of Haiti is even larger than the population of the Dominican Republic, for a third of the territory of the island, whereas we have 2/3 of the territory. And then there is erosion in Haiti in the agriculture. Only 2% of the lands are still forested. No? The rest of it is eroded. Therefore, there are pressures for the population to get out of land because the land is no longer fertile. And then the jobs in the urban centers in Haiti are just very, very scarce. Therefore, there is a pressure to migrate. And what's easier for them to do but just to go across the border and see what they can find next door. And that's, I think, the triangular process that we're experiencing. The Dominicans live for the United States and elsewhere. We have, I would say, 350,000 Dominicans in Europe, about a comparable figure in South America, but well over 1 million in the United States, most of which in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
Yes, but I still don't understand, turning to Haiti, this enormous difference between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, which is the same island, and just two separate colonial histories. But I would imagine that the people are more or less the same.
Yes.
And so if the people are the same, how is it that the Dominican Republic population migrates so successfully and has built up a level of education and technical competence? You see them as very technically competent. The Dominicans in Brooklyn, for example, and in Queens, they are very highly competent in technical matters. Whereas the Haitians don't distinguish themselves in that manner. And they also have great difficulties in migrating to the United States. The United States is constantly pushing back the boat people from Haiti, whereas the Dominicans managed to get through. Are you smarter than the Haitians?
No, I don't think so.
Are you, do you swim better? What is the technique that you are
Well,
using to infiltrate this country?
I have a different perception, Ambassador. I think the difficulties, the hurdles for migration don't discriminate by national origin. It's becoming more and more difficult because it is more and more politically delicate in developed countries such as the United States to receive more migrants. This is a fact. This is part of the political scene, not only here, but also in Belgium, where I was ambassador, or before that in Switzerland. This is a fact that we have to live with. And that's why in the negotiations, Pakistan and Dominican Republic have pushed for an alternative, which is the movement of natural persons on the basis of temporary contracts. We weren't lucky with the United States in getting that type of concessions in our DR-CAFTA negotiations, in which I did not participate. In fact, I resigned from government due to the way this was being managed, was an exercise in docking to an agreement that had been negotiated by another group, the Central American countries. But with the European Union, we were able to get it. But going back to your question, why do you see this easy integration? I have a different perception concerning the Haitians. The Haitians are very hardworking. The Haitians are as smart as we are. And the fact of the matter is that the sizable presence of Haitians in Miami, in Montreal, in Paris, and more or less in New York is also an example of success. They have educated themselves. They are very refined intellectuals, most of them. But the difference between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is a cultural difference. The Haitians, if you remember, their independence in 1804 was a very bloody exercise, was a revolution, was the first elimination, the first case of abolition of slavery, and it was an exercise in agrarian reform. Land holdings were very large-scale land holdings, slave-based land holdings were reformed and split, and the ownership since then in small land holdings became an ownership of smaller and smaller and smaller land holdings over the different generations. No? And therefore, you had a very large population in the smaller part of the island handling the territory in a more and more unsustainable way. So their initial advantage of a larger population and a very productive colony, it was the most productive colony and the richest colony France ever had in the world, okay, became a disadvantage because of the unsustainable management of the resources, the way the agrarian reform worked. And in the Dominican Republic, we had the smaller population. It is a miracle that we remained independent, facing the threat of our neighbor with a larger population that occupied us for 22 years. But that initial disadvantage turned out to be a blessing in disguise because we were able to eventually start our development process without managing our resources in the unsustainable way our neighbors had ended up managing their own side. And when you stand at the border, I recommend reading a very interesting book that most of you must know. It's called Collapse. And the author is a very famous author, Jared Diamond, who's more famous for his still in the bestseller list book called Guns, Germs, and Steel. There is a chapter there dedicated to the Dominican Republic and Haiti. And the conclusion is that the choices we have made as peoples are the explanation for the different outcomes of our historical paths. And in spite of the environmental determinism that some people may like to present as an explanation, the fact of the matter is that the choices we made historically explain the status of Haiti as the only least developed country in the hemisphere, and the situation in the Dominican Republic, in which we can stand at the border and see one side more or less green, 28% coverage, still forested areas, the rest more or less successful agriculture, 74 national parks protected, largest in terms of a percentage of the national territory than any other country in the hemisphere. In Haiti, you only have 2 or 3 national parks and only 2% coverage of forests. The rest